Dream vacations turning into nightmares. The U.S. Department of State issuing an urgent travel advisory to Americans as violence continues at popular tourist destinations like Cancun and Acapulco.
Yeah, there were over 25,000 murders in Mexico last year, with violent crime like kidnapping, carjacking, and robbery also on the rise.
So how did these dream destinations become murder hotbeds? Joining us now is TravelPulse.com founder Mark Murphy. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So give us an update on what's going on in Cancun from your perspective.
So the State Department warning in regards to Playa del Carmen was the latest thing with the ferry.
Yeah.
Turns out that was a political attack based on a former governor. So it's very isolated. They've now walked that back, and there are certain areas, just like in New York City, or I have a home down in New Jersey. I don't go hang out in the middle of Camden at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't go to certain areas that you know are hotbeds for either gangs or drugs. And there are areas outside of the tourist zones themselves that have that. Yeah. So that's what they want you to stay away from.
Okay, so and we're talking about Cancun here, and obviously if you're a tourist, you're going into the resorts and you think that you're still reasonably safe. But let's look at another place like Acapulco. When I read this article earlier this week, I read some things that I didn't know, which is just how popular it once was. It was a place where the Kennedys honeymooned. It's where the Clintons honeymooned.
It was the
Rat Pack hung out there. It had its heyday, and now today it's deteriorated to the point where even in the resorts you really can't go, and it's only really Mexicans that are going to Acapulco to vacation.
You don't really hear people going there anymore.
Right.
Well, and you have to look at the factors. So airlift slowed down going into Acapulco. Cancun emerged as a destination because in those days Cancun didn't even exist. Yeah. So Cancun was a new phenomenon. So they've pulled to Cancun. They've pulled to Los Cabos. So Acapulco got less airlift. When you have less direct flights from the U.S., you can have a much tougher way to get there. Versus New York, you can fly nonstop right into Cancun. So Cancun has boomed. There's almost 10 million people going into Cancun every year now.
But I was going to ask, could that happen to Cancun?
I don't think so, because number one, if you come into Cancun Airport, and I was just there a couple of months ago, and I take 20 family members there every year for Christmas, and I did it again, and I'm going to do it again this year, despite the travel warnings, because I had that experience on the ground. It is a safe destination. You get out of the plane, you go to a transfer, and you go to your resort. There are 1,000 hotels and resorts in the Cancun Riviera Maya region, so there's tons of options, and you are if you go to those resorts, you'll find that there's a lot of security just to get into the resort, let alone to get to where the actual tourists are enjoying a vacation.
So we do have some facts here, just so people are at home can be up to speed and know what we're talking about. Over 25,000 murders in Mexico in 2017. 10 murder scenes investigated a day in Acapulco. Over 15 million tourists visited Mexico so far this year. So my question to you is, would you still advise people to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be in Mexico in the month of April.
Right.
So again, you have to look at the facts on the ground. Let's take New York City. We're sitting here in New York City. I'm here. I have a home that's in New York City where I come for getaways, etc. And what did we have in the last 4 or 5 months? We had people getting run over on the West Side Highway. There was a terrorist attack. We had a bombing in the subway right down the street here in Times Square. We had the Times Square bomber. We had the Chelsea bombings. But we're not telling people to stay away from New York. And millions of people coming in every day for work, for leisure travel and vacations. So it's applying common sense to the actual problem, and you avoid it's
and being aware.
Exactly. Situational awareness is always key.
Isn't this a little bit different, because we're not dealing with problems like a corrupted government and drug cartels buying out officials and doing. I mean, that is a general issue that affects everybody. Well, now in New York we don't have that problem. We have isolated incidents.
Of course, and that is a problem, and the Mexican government has to address that, because there is corruption, and they have to take care of that. What that's impacting, to be frank, are the locals. So when you say murders in Acapulco, murders in Cancun, it's not murders in the tourist areas. It's murders where the locals live. It might be 10, 15 miles away from where any tourist would ever venture, and that's where it's happening. And I think the people that are getting impacted by that corruption, by those drug cartels, are the Mexican nationals there, not tourists. Last year, 20 million Americans went to Mexico. How many had an issue?
Right.
And why did they grow from the 15th most visited destination in the world to number 8 literally in the last decade? So the numbers go both ways, to be frank.
Mark Murphy, founder of TravelPulse.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.